Hello everybody and welcome back to World of Tanks, and welcome today to a continuation of my favourite tank series, and today we have moved up to tier 6. Now again, a quick bit at the start of the video just to explain the gold element of how these videos work. Unfortunately nobody on my last video won any gold, but you have a chance to win some on this one. All you need to do is in the comments write in what you think my favourite tier 7 tanks are going to be. That's 3 light tanks, 3 medium tanks, 3 heavy tanks, 3 tank destroyers. Number them 3, 2 and 1. Number 3 being my least favourite and number 1 being my most favourite of each class. If you get all of the tanks, not necessarily in the right order, so all 12 tanks correct, you get 500 gold. If you can get all 12 tanks in the correct order, I will give you 1,000 gold. Anything else you guys want to know about this series, simply head back to my favourite tier 5 tanks video, because I do a bit more of an explanation at the start of that video, and then jump back to here and see what my favourite tier 6s are. But without further ado, let's jump in and we shall start with the light tanks. So, first up and coming in at number 3 for the light tanks, we have the AMX-12T. This thing is the French auto-loading tier 6 light tank, obviously. It has the 4-shell auto-loader these days. It used to have a 6-shell auto-loader, but it's still pretty fun being able to fire 4 shells pretty quickly off. And, yeah, it's just a quick tank. It's more unique than the rest of the other tanks on the list. My second and first favourite you will obviously know if you've been around my streams at all. But this tank I think is the best of the rest for me. It's just good fun. It's versatile with the autoloader. It's just a pretty good tank all round. So, coming in at number 2 for the light tanks, we have got the oldie-ish, but goldie, the T50-2, as we can see here, rolling this thing out in the old style camouflage. This thing is absolutely rapid and has got a 57mm gun, as you're about to see. It's rate of fire. It's like an autoloader that never has to reload. It is absolutely lovely. I just love this thing. I love its ability to get around the battlefield. I love its ability to sit behind someone, put 3 shots in before they've even realised that you're there. It is an absolutely lovely tank. An amazing tank. And all you have to do to get this thing is play the game. Once you've played the game for 3 or 4 years, I can't remember exactly, you get your hands on this thing. So keep playing. And one day you will have this thing if you haven't got it already, and it is well worth it. And as a surprise to absolutely nobody, at number 1 for my favourite tier 6 light tank, we have the Type 64. This thing, really nice light tank. I've had this thing for absolutely ages. It was one of my first premium tanks, I believe. But I've had it for so long that I honestly can't remember. Really fast firing 76mm gun, really mobile. It comes from a different age of light tanks. This tank used to be able to face tier 10s, and I don't really think it's changed much since it was able to, which does make it very good. If I could recommend one tier 6 light tank, it would be this thing. It is absolutely awesome. If you want to get your hands on this thing, I believe you still can buy it in-game for gold, and I would honestly recommend it if you're a good light tank player. Just a fun thing to play at tier 6. You can also play in tier 6 strongholds and everything like that, and it is just absolutely lovely. 72 km/h top speed, really fast firing 76mm gun. Excellent tank all round. With that, that's the light tanks finished off. Let's move on to the medium tanks. And at number 3 on my most favourite tier 6 medium tanks, we have got ourselves the Thunderbolt 7. This tank is probably a surprise to the newer of my viewers. But if you've been watching for a long time, you'll know that when I played this thing, just after I got it, I absolutely love the tank. It's a Sherman that combines armor and mobility. It's not, obviously, I know that you say mobility, you don't instantly think Sherman, but it kind of is a halfway house between the Sherman Jumbo's amazing armor for a tier 6 medium tank and a standard Sherman's a lot better mobility. Also combine that with, again, a nice 76mm gun, bits of spaced armor dotted all over the tank, which is very, very nice indeed. And because you don't see this thing that much, its armor does take people massively by surprise. You can have some really, really good games with this thing, and as you can see, it's one of the tanks at tier 6 that I have 3 marked, along with the Fury, which unfortunately doesn't make it to this list because I just prefer the Thunderbolt 7 so much more. Now, number 2 of the medium tanks. And at number 2, I have a tank that will probably actually surprise a lot of people, I feel. It is the Skoda T25. Now, this thing is probably not a pick that a lot of people would have been expecting. It's the tier 6 Czechoslovakian medium tank, and one of the reasons I've picked this tank is because it's unique. It's very, very different. This thing has a 3-shell autoloader, as you're about to see. That has I think it's 1.3 seconds between shells. So effectively, you're hitting for, I think it's 330 damage within 2 seconds, and then only takes about 7 seconds to reload. Now, that's almost kind of like an auto reloader, because your reload is so fast. You can fire 1 or 2, reload, and then people don't usually have time to react to get back to you. Being able to do those 3 shots, then fall back only for 7 seconds or so. Yes, it's not quite the sustained rate of fire of a Type 64 or a Cromwell B or something like that, for example. But being able to put in 3 shots, then fall back, but the enemies in that time can't really rush you. They're still only going to get, at most, probably 3 shots in as well. Means you are an absolute menace on the battlefield for same tier and even sometimes higher tier tanks, especially medium tanks and light tanks that you're probably going to be facing, because you're just able to out damage them most of the time. And yeah, that's why I love this tank. It's also a fast tank, it's got good gun depression, all of the usual things. So what's going to beat it at number 1? Coming in at number 1 for the medium tanks, I don't think it'll be much of a surprise to some people, but I also think it'll be quite a lot of a surprise to some others. We have the T-3485M. Just probably the best all-round tier 6 medium tank in the game right now. It is absolutely amazing. It's a premium tank that you can get pretty cheap, so if you're planning on playing tier 6 ever, I would honestly recommend getting this thing. It's really, really good. The reason it's probably not a surprise to some people is because at the minute this thing is just one of, like I keep saying, the best tier 6 tanks, which is why I absolutely love it. But the reason it may be a surprise to some people is the fact that this tank suspiciously doesn't look like a Cromwell B or a Cromwell. And that will be for the really old long-term viewers of my stream. The Cromwell/Cromwell B was probably my favourite tank in the game for a very, very, very long time. The first tank that I 3-marked was the Cromwell, and to not have a place on this list does kind of feel a bit sad, but all of the other tanks that you've seen, I just prefer them to the Cromwell these days. It's really, really, really sad, but unfortunately, I just do. So, yeah, that is my number 1 pick for medium tanks. Now let's move on to the heavy tanks. Kicking off the heavy tanks, and in at number 3, I have got the Tiger, gone for the Tiger 131. This could also probably be replaced with the heavy tank number 6, because statistically I believe they are identical. But looks-wise, I just prefer the Tiger 131 so much, and the fact that it's obviously a German Tiger makes it much, much better. But this tank, not only for the looks, the fact that I've seen it in real life, in-game, it's also a pretty decent heavy tank. It obviously has the same armor model as the Tier 7 Tiger, but down here at Tier 6, which means with a bit of angling, you can actually make this armor work much, much better down here. Has the historic 88mm gun, the 88 KWK 36 L56 if I'm not mistaken, which is very nice. It still does that 220 alpha. Is it 220 or 240? I honestly can't remember which, but well, that's a very big hole all of a sudden in the front of my tank. But it is still a very nice heavy tank. You've still got the alpha to trade with a lot of things, especially mediums, lights and stuff like that. Not an IS-2S as I'm about to there. But nonetheless, this is a very, very, very nice tank. And yeah, let's jump down to number 2. Now, coming in at number 2 for my favourite Tier 6 heavies, we have got the KV-85. Obviously, this tank has had a bit of a complicated history. It used to be the KV-1S, then it got moved to the KV-85, and it lost that meaty 122mm gun. Obviously, it still has one, but it got nerfed slightly. And then, now, in a more recent patch, this thing has now been taken out of the tech tree and is now a collector's vehicle. But in my opinion, still one of the best Tier 6 tanks. Don't rely on this thing for its armor. You rely on this thing by using its 100mm gun. A very nice rate of fire, really decent penetration, good accuracy, good aim time for a heavy tank. The only real downside to this tank that I always find is such an issue is the atrocious 3 degrees of gun depression. But if you can work around that, this tank is an absolute beast at Tier 6. And you just can't really go wrong with it. It's absolutely amazing and good fun. So it's going to take something pretty special to keep this thing off of number 1. Now to number 1 for the heavies, and if anybody guessed any different, then I'm incredibly disappointed in you. There was not going to be another tank that I preferred more. It was always going to be the KV-2. I can't remember if I had that shot or not. It was always going to be the KV-2. The 152mm massive boomstick sticking out the front of this gun. The ability to one-shot same tier tanks. The ability to do 300, 400 damage to a tier 8 tank without even really aiming at them. You can hit pixel shots on the side of tracks and still do damage. And most importantly, you are the most accurate tank in the game because of the Russian bias. 100% hit rate, even if you don't hit. Did you really miss? No problem. Kicking off the tank destroyers at number 3, we have the M36 Jackson. It was really, really close between the M36 Jackson and the standard SU-100. However, I just remember back in the day absolutely loving this thing. It's probably more of a unique pick, and I think more people would pick the SU-100, and that's probably one of the reasons I picked this tank, because it's not a tank that a lot of people are going to pick. But the gun is absolutely amazing. 10 degrees gun depression, good pen, good accuracy. Obviously, same gun as on the Hellcat, but I think the gun actually performs a little bit better on this thing. It's not quite as fast as the Hellcat, but still by no means slow, and does have a little bit more armor. Not saying that it has massively dependable armor, but you can resist HE from the front. Occasionally, you do get a bounce or two off the hull. So this thing, I really, really like this thing, and it only just beat out the SU-100 at number 3. So we'll see if we can bring it back that way at number 2. With that, I don't think you can really get more Russian than the SU-100Y. This thing always will hold a place in my heart. This was my first ever premium tank. It is the tank that I got my first ever Pools medal in, and more to the point, it's got a bloody huge gun on it. 130mm, one of the very few tanks in the game that still has higher damage and less penetration on the premium rounds, which can always be funny. And it takes tier 8 or even tier 9 or tier 10 size holes out of people down at tier 6. It's a bloody lovely tank, and yeah, it's just so fun to play, mixed in with being a decent tank. I'm not going to say it's great because, well, look at the size of it, but it's a decent tank. You still do not want to argue with this thing at all. And finally, in at the number 1 spot, the final number 1 of this video, we have the M18 Hellcat. This is my favourite tier 6 tank destroyer. Combine the speed with the gun, the versatility of it, it's just great. It's good fun to play. It's stealthy, it hits hard. It's just so fun. The only downsides really to this tank are the turret traverse and obviously the armor, being the fact that it's non-existent. But this thing is such a fun tank, and if you've never played the M18 Hellcat, you owe it to yourself to go down to tier 6 at some point. I'm not saying now because obviously I know credits and blah blah blah, but you owe it to yourself at some point to go down and play this thing. It is a really good tank. Unfortunately not as good as it used to be. It used to be a hell of a lot better, but it has had a couple of nerfs over the years. But this thing is definitely one of the best, if not the best, tier 6 tank destroyers, and one of my favourite, well, one of my favourite tier 6s, my favourite tier 6 tank destroyer. So there we go, guys. That was my rundown of my favourite tier 6 tanks. I hope you've enjoyed this video. This is obviously only the second video in this series. There is still several more to come, so get yourselves guessing on those tier 7 tanks. That will be coming up in the next couple of weeks at some point, and I will definitely be streaming at some point, so if you go head over there, you're probably more likely to know which are my favourite tanks, although I don't play tier 7 a huge amount. But the tier 8s, tier 9s and tier 10s, you've got more of a chance. I hope you guys are enjoying these videos. If you are, please consider giving the video a like. Go back and watch the tier 5 video if you don't really know what these are all about, because like I said, I did a lot more explaining at the start of that video. If you want to see the next ones, please make sure you subscribe. Make sure you get guessing your tier 7 tanks for the gold. And thank you very much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.